Apple's original HomePod was a complete failure, and as somebody who actually still uses two HomePods as his main TV speakers, I stand by that statement 100%, but not for the reason you probably think. So today, I want to talk about why I think the original HomePod failed and how it could have potentially succeeded if things were done a little differently. So let's get started. So back in 2018, Apple got up on stage and announced their first foray into the smart home speaker market, and this was actually a very popular trend at the time. I should know because I was working as a smart home expert at Best Buy when this was announced, and when I saw the $350 price tag, I figured that it was not going to be a very popular device for a lot of reasons, but the key one is that people didn't care about the sound quality, they cared about the smart home integration. And when Apple introduced this product, they focused on sound quality, and especially at that time, Siri's smart home integration was not great. At the time that the HomePod was originally introduced, we had speakers that were between $130 to $150 coming from Google and Amazon with the Google Home and the Amazon Alexa. And these were extraordinarily popular for somebody who wanted decent sound quality and great smart home integration. But the trick that both Google and Amazon figured out very early on was that for the person who did not care at all about sound quality, they would sell an extremely cheap version of these speakers, which was the Google Home Mini and the Amazon Echo Dot. And when I say that the Echo Dot and the Google Home Mini were cheap, I mean that they started at $50, and I remember on Black Friday seeing them as low as $25. These were extraordinarily cheap. So if you're looking at those kind of prices because you don't want to spend $130 to $150 on these devices' big brothers, there is no way on earth that you're spending $350 for a massive speaker that has a less than stellar voice assistant with good sound quality. But to be fair, this was kind of par for the course for Apple back in 2018. They would introduce something that was too little too late, a little bit over-engineered, and a lot of bit overpriced. Yes, I just said a lot of it. But that was just how things were back then. You had the MacBooks that were underperforming in every way due to thermal issues, but they were extremely expensive, and they were only just now starting to get updates to modern Intel chips, because Intel was kind of sitting on their laurels, which is why we now have Apple Silicon, but that's a video for another day. At this point in 2018, we had already had several years of smart home development, and the companies that were on it, with Google and Amazon being the main two, they had many years under their belt already before Apple even remotely tried to get into the space. And while HomeKit had been around for a while and was actually a very viable smart home option, I actually use it in my personal space, it was not very well integrated with Siri. I mean, to be fair, in 2018, Siri was not great anyway, and has only recently started to become that little bit more useful in the home. But now you're probably asking yourself, okay, if the HomePod was all of these things that really didn't work well in the smart home space, what did it do well? Well, it did really well when it came to audio quality. Yeah, so as I mentioned at the very beginning, I still use my HomePods hooked up through the Apple TV as my TV speakers. And with the new Apple TV supporting eARC, meaning that it can actually output the audio to the speakers from anything, including my game consoles, they are fantastic for TV speakers. And whenever I want to listen to music, they are really good. Now, they're not studio accurate. They are definitely tuned for the entertainment side of audio more so than the accuracy side of audio, which is fine because when you're watching a movie, you want the bass and you want that punch, and especially considering that the 7 microphones built in to assist Siri with hearing you also work for tuning the speakers to the room, they will fill a space extremely well. And when you're playing a video game like Halo, so these were incredibly good speakers, but they were going up against okay speakers that were literally $200 cheaper and had a better voice assistant, and because they had been around so much longer while integrating with their respective smart home systems, they had a better smart home control platform. Yeah, can you see why they failed? Like I said, the original HomePod was too little too late. It was way too over-engineered for what it was trying to do in the market, and it was way too expensive. So while you would get the people who want a good audio system, or even just one singular good speaker, you're not going to get the market who wants just a standard speaker to throw somewhere, kind of get out of your way, and just give you a detached voice in your house to control your stuff with. and I guess occasionally play music. And so with all those things combined, unless you fell into a very specific niche category, or you were like me and wanted a high quality speaker from Apple that wasn't made back when the iPod was a big deal, you probably wouldn't buy this HomePod. But I said at the start of this video that I was going to explain how I feel like this could have been a successful product if things had been done a little differently. Enter the HomePod Mini. Now, the HomePod Mini was introduced as a mini counterpart to the full-size HomePod, and it was, in my opinion, what should have come out first, because it was cheaper, starting at $99. It did compromise on the speakers because, well, there's only so much you can do with a tiny little speaker like this, but it also came out after Apple had already begun to put a lot of time and effort into improving Siri and its integration with HomeKit. What Apple realized with the HomePod Mini, and unfortunately realized too late to save the full-size HomePod, was that people were willing to compromise on things like speaker quality when it came to integrating a speaker into their home to control their electronics. If somebody really wants to control their lights with their voice, there has to be a reason for them not to just pull their phone out and do it that way if they're using smart home equipment. And having a detached voice from a hidden speaker somewhere is always going to be a better option, because you just say something and it knows what to do and you don't even have to see it. But when you want to play music, it still has to be at least good enough to listen to and fill a room without sounding like you're listening to music through a tin can, like the first gen Echo Dot, for example. But even with the compromises Apple did put into the HomePod Mini, like the plastic top instead of glass, or the smaller speaker and lower speaker quality to bring the price down, there were still things that Apple learned from the original HomePod that they brought into the Mini. Things like the better microphone array, in order for the speaker to actually hear you when you make a request, even if the music is blasting, or that really nice subtle glow to the top of it when there is something playing, because the original HomePod had these little disappearing volume indicators so you could tell when it was playing. Well, you can always see the volume indicators on the top of the Mini because of the plastic, so they just made the top subtly glow, and that glow adjusts depending on the brightness of the room. Also, I just love the LED animation whenever you speak to Siri. This was from the original HomePod and the Mini. Also, the sound transparent material they used on both speakers is still one of the best materials, both in terms of feel. It doesn't collect dust super easily on the white or black models, and generally it's just really nice looking in any environment. Add to that the fact that the HomePod Mini can also be paired in stereo and carries over the ability to listen to the room to tune the speakers to its play environment, and you have a device that is significantly better than its closest competition in the Google Home Mini and the Echo Dot, and even begins to run circles around the full-size Echo Dot and the Google Home full-size. Now granted, you do still have things like the Google Home Max and the Echo Studio, but for those price points, you're back to the HomePod, and the HomePod will win against those, in my opinion, every single time. But now hold on a minute, because I just mentioned the Google Home Max and the Echo Studio, and both of those were sold fairly successfully by their respective companies, yet the HomePod failed. Well, this is why I think the HomePod could have succeeded if things were done differently, because when the HomePod Mini was introduced, it was introduced second after the HomePod was already failing. Because Apple put their foot into the market first with an extremely expensive device with great sound quality and mediocre overall home controls, you really kind of shot yourself in the foot that you stepped into the market with. Then, once you realized that you had shot yourself in the foot, you introduced a less expensive version with compromises that people were willing to live with, and that's the one that sold better. Whereas with Google and Amazon, they both introduced a mid-tier and low-tier product, and then once they had that market kind of cornered in the case of Amazon, then they introduced the more expensive option. Apple did as Apple does and flip-flopped the introduction that every other company did and introduced the most expensive device first, then introduced the more affordable, slightly more compromised, but in a way people are willing to live with version of their product. And that's why the HomePod was, in my opinion, and a lot of other people's opinion, an abject failure, but could have potentially still been around had Apple introduced the more compromised, more affordable version first. But hey, that's been it. Thank you all so much for watching this video. I hope you all enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to like and subscribe. Maybe hit the bell notice so you don't actually miss anything coming up, because I've got a lot of stuff coming from products sent to me, retro stuff. If y'all want to support me, I do sell merch. You can check out the link to that down in the description. And aside from that, I hope you all have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you all in the next video. Make sure to be there, and have a good one.